Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Takes a Village podcast. I'm Pastor Lorenzo Evans with my co-host Ariana Turner. How you doing today?
Blessed and highly favored. I'm thankful to be here and excited for the day and for our village.
Yes, I think it's going to be a good day. I mean, we have so many times that we have guests on here that speaks of their talents and their skill set. But I think today our conversation is going to be one that's very needed and in depth because we normally do things and we never think about the fact. What about those people who can see but cannot hear? What about those people who are hearing impaired and we going about our normal day? And there is information that we give out that they may need or they may want. So today we're gonna have someone that's an expertise in this area, in this field, that's gonna really be able to enlighten us because I think we do take it for granted. I think we just feel like everybody can hear, even though we see or know those that can't. We just never actually stop and say, what would it be like if our world went blank and we couldn't hear anything? How would we operate? How would we treat people, or how would people treat us? So I'm very excited that we have Vicki Bass in the house today, who's going to give us an insight on that subject. So let's go ahead and bring our guest in here. How you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you all?
Doing good.
Welcome.
Doing good.
That's
Yes.
great.
Just excited to have you on because again, you are an expert in this field. Um, and we just go about our busy day never thinking about what challenges would people have if they can't hear what we hear. If we're
Absolutely.
getting ready to do something and somebody call our name or we forget something or whatever, we have the ability to hear. But what if it's someone who can't? What if it's somebody trying to cross the street, they don't hear the horn blow, or certain things like that. So I'm very excited to dig into this conversation today because um, when I was younger, I used to be real interested in it and I wanted to learn sign language and such. And different things happened and I never really got to, but I've always been very interested in it. And I think anyone who have that skill set is a very special person to dedicate the time to learn that. And not only to learn it, but to learn it correctly. You know,
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%.
yeah.
One thing, though, it's never too late to learn.
Well, that's true. That's true. And that's I was looking at some things earlier this week, and I was like, it's still a good thing to learn. So I'm gonna definitely keep that in the forefront. But let's go ahead and everyone, you want to introduce and give the people a little information about our guest today?
Yes, I would love to share with the village the blessing that we have today in meeting Miss Vicki Bass. As Pastor Lorenzo shared with us, she is a pioneer in guiding us to connecting with those who aren't able to hear the world the way that we can. Miss Vicki Bass is an educational sign language interpreter in a local metro Atlanta area school system. She served as president of the NAOBI, which is Atlanta National Alliance of Black Interpreters, for 3 years, having previously served also as vice president, secretary of this particular organization. The NAOBI of Atlanta supports and provides professional development and resources for sign language interpreters. Vicki also is the leader of the Sign Language Ministry of Light of the World Christian Tabernacle International in Stockbridge, Georgia. Having a deep level of love for and commitment to the deaf community, one of Miss Vicki's main objectives is to support the deaf community in any way that she can, and ensuring that the deaf children she works for with has every opportunity to become all that God has intended for them to be with no limitations. And Village, this is a blessing because as you, as we have all learned in life, all of us experience shortcomings or opportunities where we can do better, or we feel like we're a little lost or cut off or isolated. And so this is an opportunity for us to open up that awareness to a community within our community and making sure that we learn every way to embrace and support in the ways Miss Vicki does. And so, Miss Vicki, I'm really excited to share with us comfort, how we can be better in bridging that gap.
Great, great. Well, it's great to be with you all today. So I'm happy to share whatever you would like to know.
Okay.
We have some wonderful, wonderful people in the deaf community, and we just need to shine a light on them.
Yes, because it's nothing that any impairment should never stop anyone from doing anything. So let me ask you this. Let's start with this. What inspired you to learn sign language, and how did you get started in that?
Well, it goes back a whole lot of years to when I was a child. I'm from Talladega, Alabama. And in Talladega, we have multiple facilities for uh, deaf and hard of hearing individuals, from children, deaf blind people, and adults. So we have pretty much all levels for the deaf and deaf blind community and the blind community as well. So I remember as a child just being in the store, a grocery store, for example, with my mother, and I would see people signing, and I was always curious, just wondering, what are they saying? And it always intrigued me. And so that sparked my desire to learn sign language. I also had an association with one of the mothers in our community. Back in the day, when parents trying to make things happen, I used to ride home from school with a little girl who was a year younger than me, but her mother would pick us up in the afternoons and bring us home from school. And I would spend some time in the afternoon at their home until my mother and father got home from work. Now, Miss Terrell, her name is Miss Ernestine Terrell, and she worked at I'm sorry, at Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind. And when I learned that Miss Terrell knew sign language, I would have her give me little private lessons. So I started with the alphabet, which is where everybody needs to start. Because the beautiful thing about the alphabet, we just think about it as letters, ABC, just think about just letters, but those letters make words, and those words make sentences. And so at least even just knowing the alphabet is better than not knowing anything at all, because you're still able to communicate with someone who is deaf and hard of hearing. So that's where it started for me. And moving on from there, when I was in college, I went to Talladega College. Shout out to Talladega College. But I realized I thought I wanted to go into law. My cousin and I had always talked about starting our law firm together. But when I realized they had a major where I could focus my energies into empowering and learning more about the deaf community, I switched my major. So, of course, my cousin, he kept his stream, but I changed my major. So, my degree, at the time, the major was called Rehabilitation for the Deaf. And that's what my degree is in 1981. Had a fabulous internship at the Helen Keller School. And that's where it started for me.
So that's interesting because I know when we were young, or not really younger, but when I had first moved to Ohio, our neighbor, they were deaf, and they had all these different things they used to help assist them. Like, we knew when a phone would ring because they had this big, and this was way back years ago, big old thing on the top of their house, and it would flash and such. And we always knew they had a phone call, and they used to come across all the time. And it was amazing that even though the mother could speak a little bit, but not really well, that we communicated with them because we were just so, over time, got so used to things in our mind. We never thought about the fact that this is their everyday thing, and they have to speak to everybody. I never thought about, what if she go out to someone who's not used to her? How do they get what they want? How do they get somebody's attention? So it's very interesting that as a young child, that you would see that and acknowledge the fact that, hey, this is something that may be needed. And as you grew older, I mean, you adapted to that need. You didn't just see it and say, well, it'll be okay. You realize that there's something that I can add value to. So I think that's something that's very, very good. And we can't, gloss over that, because a lot of people would have picked being an attorney over that without thinking because of the
Right.
money. So that's something that definitely you need to be, we need to, nod our head to you for doing that, because many people probably have the ability to help people, but because of the money, they go in a different direction.
Right. Right.
So
You know,
that was.
that really about me too was the journey and how you saw something that took your heart and you went and sought out the resource and development of the private lessons, and then really finding the specialized major that actually highlighted what your gift and heart leaned into. And so I like that Pastor Papa Joe pointed out that a lot of times we, in this journey of life, we will struggle to push our purpose aside for what we think will give us status or elevation. And so in this, I'm thankful that the village is able to receive the how to execute that journey and be committed in finding those resources and really digging into that pathway of your gift.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
and,
Now,
and
and one thing I did like, so I shared with you my major and my internship. But when I graduated from college, I moved to Atlanta, and unfortunately, at the time, I was not able to find a job in my field.
mm,
So I ended up, my minor was business. So I ended up kind of moving in on the business end. Ended up spending 26 years in corporate. But the thing was, the beautiful thing about where I worked, we had deaf people that worked there. So
mm,
I felt that I still had a connection to the deaf community, so I would always, make time and, communicate with them, go out to see them in their areas where they work. So I felt like I've always been connected. It just was not um, what am I trying to say? My career directly at that time. So I worked in corporate for years, and it's just, those heartstrings tug. You got this little tugging at your heartstrings. One thing that I always wanted to make a difference in was the perception or misperception in the
mhm,
hearing community about the deaf community. For example, if a deaf person, one of the ways for communicating, you spoke of, when deaf people go out, how do they communicate with other people who may not know the language? And that language being American Sign Language, which has its own grammatical structure and everything. So the deaf person might write a note, but remember, their first language is not English. Their first language is ASL, American Sign Language. And
mm,
so somebody that's strong in English might look at that note. Now, this is depending upon the you know the level of English that deaf person may or may not know. But they might look at the note, and then maybe because the grammar is different, they might look at it and say, that doesn't make sense. You have topic comment first. You don't have the subject first. And so a lot of people read that, and then you've got a misconception. Oh, that person doesn't write well. But remember, it's not their first language. ASL is their first language. So that's one of the misconceptions, and then those misconceptions turn into other things where, judgment is passed, and it should not be, you know. So that's one of the things you talk about, the misconceptions that can occur, and that indeed is one of them. But we have some brilliant people in the deaf community, some that know our English language as well as we know it, and some people who focus on ASL more so than English. But we've, those are some of the things we have to really make a difference with, as far as just sharing information with people and stifling some of the misconceptions that occur.
and that's where you come in at, because you're able to bridge that gap. And there's so many people, I think, and I think it's very unfair, so unfair. But again, that's where we're raised, I believe, or programmed, when someone different from us, we instantly think that it's an educational situation,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and a lot of times it's not. And if you're not like I said, if your first language is not grammar, English, writing, whatever, you're not going to be as strong in it. And
Right.
you know, it's funny that we will take a person who may be a foreign person and accept their ability to not communicate as well. But then when we
Mhm.
have somebody in our own community, we don't accept them. We look at them like, oh, well, it's educational. So
Right.
those prejudices is just there. And I'm glad that we have someone with your skill set because, see, here's the thing about it. Your skill set to bridge that gap is not just a natural thing. I think it's a spiritual thing as well.
Yes.
So you have the grace and you can reach people in a way that's soothing and it keeps down the tension of the situation, if you will. So
Okay.
that's a double blessing when it comes to that because, like I said, there are many misconceptions when it comes to that. Because I know I've always looked and wondered how did they do this, how did they do that,
Right.
but in
Yeah.
seeing that, I never moved to do anything to change that such the way that you did.
Right. Right. Understand. And you talk about the things. What can deaf people do? What can they not do? They could do everything we could do except hear. A lot of
Hmm.
people are surprised. Wait a minute, your deaf friend drives? Yes, they drive, and they're signing. So you talk about, but you don't see a whole lot of deaf um, accidents in the deaf community. But yes, they drive. I've got some friends that drive for Uber. Yes, deaf. You know, so it's just a matter of, we talk about misconceptions as well. A lot of people think, oh, if I talk louder, they'll understand what I mean, or
Hmm.
read my lips. There's no such thing as reading lips
Hmm.
to gain 100% of language. The professionals say that only 30 to 40% of what you can pick up from the lips is accurate. We don't think about that, but if I like a F, my mouth is going to look the same as it does with a V, and the same with so many other letters. So a lot of people in the hearing community think, oh, I'll just talk louder, or
Hmm.
do you understand? Like really enunciating, those things are not helpful at all. So it's just a matter, it used to be writing back and forth. Now, of course, deaf people have gotten savvy. They're going to have their cell phone, so they're going to text what they want to ask. I had a beautiful experience, and I don't mean to ramble on, so slow me down if you need to. I have a beautiful experience that happened back in November. My oldest grandson turned 3. I turned 2, and my daughter, he loves animals, so my daughter had gotten a petting zoo to come to the house, and they brought these animals and everything. Now, it's amazing the people who came to set up, um, they were deaf.
Mm.
And so they arrived. My husband and I had gotten there, but we were helping with some things for the party inside the house. And my daughter, she answered the door, and then she's like, "Mom, we need you." And so I came to the door, and I'm gonna try to remember. Dwayne is the young man's name, and I have their card, but I can't remember Dwayne and Wanda. And they did such a phenomenal job with the petting zoo. Now, it just so happened I was there. If I had not been there, they would have been just fine.
Hmm.
They would, put in their phone whatever message they wanted to communicate. Because I even let them communicate with my daughter just so people could see that they don't just always have to have an interpreter. But it was a
Hmm.
beautiful thing, and I was able to kind of fill in the gaps. And people were asking, "Oh, can we touch this animal?" and all of that. So it was a beautiful thing to be able to be helpful in that situation. But Dwayne and Wanda would have been just fine had I not been there. It's all about opportunity. If
Hmm.
opportunities are available, they're going to take advantage of those opportunities and they're going to soar.
Yeah, because I know I've watched reality shows. I think one of them was Dancing with the Stars, and everybody was amazed because one of the contenders
Mhm.
was deaf, and it was like, well,
Now,
how you?
DeMarco, yes,
Yeah, I'm like, you can't
yeah,
hear. How you gonna dance? But they did well,
yes,
and even on another one was I think it was on um, X Factor or something, and the girl came on and she was a singer. I mean, beautiful. And you know, and then you have two types also. You have those who are born deaf, so they deal with it differently than those who
Right.
something happened. So in a sense, you've got two sets of people because I think they both deal with it differently because of the way they had to adjust, and then some didn't have to adjust. But you know, some of the things you brought up really is things that we just don't think about. The fact that um, now you said they can communicate with the phones and they can do that. But if you think 15, 20 years ago, they didn't have that.
Right. Exactly.
You
Exactly.
know.
And one thing that they used to have that was so empowering in the deaf community, they used to have this thing called deaf clubs. And the
Mm,
deaf people would get together and they would, so all the kids, the deaf community is a very strong community and the young kids. So everybody was communicating with everyone. And,
wow.
it's so important, especially for younger deaf kids. It's so important for them because, like right now, the statistics say that 90% of all deaf children are born into hearing families.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm,
Now, so those families, their first language is either Spanish or English. It's not sign language, but it's really important to get those deaf children in an environment where they have deaf role models to look up to,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to get them around the deaf community. One of the things that I have a real strong issue with is people who have deaf children and they don't take the time to learn sign language.
Mm-hmm.
That is painful to me. It's difficult for the children. And I've run into certain situations personally where people will say, well, she knows what I mean, or he knows what I'm saying, but they're really minimizing their children's ability to really, really soar and thrive.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggest if there's anybody that has a deaf child, make sure that you take the time to learn the language so that you can fully communicate with your child. And we're talking before about misconceptions. I'm going to jump on another one while we're on this subject. A lot of the pediatricians promote put a cochlear implant on those kids. You can put a cochlear implant on them, they're still a deaf child.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an automatic fix for a child being able to fully hear everything and live their life out as a hearing child. They're still a deaf child. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the technology and all, it's great for certain things, but it's not an automatic replacement
Right.
for the language. There's such strength and such beauty in American Sign Language that if I had a deaf child, um, you know, definitely, if I wasn't one who knew sign language, I would definitely feel the desire to learn because I've got to be able to communicate with my child. And especially as children grow older and they really need that mom and dad advice, you got to be able to give it to them personally. So I
Right.
just encourage everybody to please, please find a way to learn the language, especially if you have a deaf child. And then just for those who don't, because the more people that know the language, the it's that much better for the deaf community. You were asking, is it difficult for the deaf community? It is because not a lot, enough people know the language.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that we can spread the beauty and the importance of knowing ASL, you never know when you're going to run into a deaf person. And you
Right.
might be that difference between, it could be an accident situation. You might be able to really, make a difference in that person's life.
Mm-hmm. And you know, and it's just that one wrong misconception could just change the whole day because somebody didn't know what that person needed or was saying or requesting.
Absolutely. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Passionate about communication. So I'm just really excited about the opportunity for us to see how we can really elevate and grow in communication with really taking our awareness to the deaf community. And a couple of things that really stood out. Is a lot of times when we don't know, we do pass that judgment, and it's because we're masking our own insecurities of being pretty much ignorant sometimes to a different community or a different language. And I love that we have highlighted the importance of being inclusive with language. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we've all been in a situation where we've been somewhere and someone else speaks a different language and they're speaking it around me and feel a little left out.
Right.
There was a us that we're bringing real life examples and experience to the table so we can talk through in the village and see of ways to navigate better with our communities. There's one show I was watching and the dad is deaf. And in one particular episode, the brother and sister are talking at the table, and they're just having a sidebar conversation, but they still continue to sign.
Hmm.
And it makes me think about how important it is that we take the time to be inclusive. And you know, that
Absolutely.
not zone on the one trying to communicate with the
You,
top community. I'm
your sound
blessed.
is muffled, Ariana. Your sound keep going in and out.
Oh, it is okay.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I just every now and then it kind of, but I can hear you good now.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, the communication is really good. So thank you for highlighting it.
Sure, sure. It's definitely essential. I know of a couple of people, for example, that went, and you're not seeing as many residential schools now,
Mm-hmm.
because of, school systems now having interpreters, there's more mainstreaming going on. But for example, I know this young man, and I remember doing a project when I went to Georgia Perimeter as well to as far as my sign language certification. And there was a project that we had to do, and one of my friends who is deaf, he was basically the person that I interviewed with several questions. I wanted to understand what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced growing up being a deaf man. And one of the things that he spoke about was he said, when it was holiday time, a lot of people would love to go home. He said, but I really didn't like going home as much because, the family, everybody's there, everybody's communicating. And he would be like, well, what did they say? What did they say? And they're like, oh, it's nothing. Just brush him aside. And so he always felt like an outsider with his own family.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of someone taking the time, first of all, to learn the language, secondly, to take the time to explain. But
Mm-hmm.
even what's even better, as you mentioned, as people are talking, they could talk, but also sign so that that deaf person feels that they are a part of the family, feels that they're a part of the conversation, not always feeling shut out or left out. So that is so important.
Yes, and I think we, like you say, we don't have. I know when I was coming up, I used to, when I lived in Ohio, I used to be a school for the deaf. They had their own little community. I used to ride by all the time, and I've always thought that was great because they could go and learn amongst their own. But then you think about the child who can't, the child who have to be
Yeah.
forced to public school,
Hmm.
how difficult it must be. And also if somebody can hear just a little bit, well, now they feel like, well, they don't need no kind of assistance because they can hear, but
Hmm.
are they able to hear everything? And what I've done a lot of times when I see people in different situations, sometimes I will try to mimic what they're going through in a sense of, let me see if I can, put something in my ears and for maybe 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. And it's like, wow, can you imagine that for a lifetime? Or try to walk around your house with your eyes closed. When you
Right.
put yourself in their position,
Hmm.
you realize the importance of acknowledging that they do need special assistance sometimes. And it's not a thing of they need to be treated like they got a issue, but it's just a different thing we have to do. And I
Right.
think if more people were to look at that and understand that it would help them out because they don't want nobody to treat them like they, timid or whatever. But at the same time, treat me normal like you would anybody else. If we
Right.
have a conversation, you wouldn't whisper in that person's ear because you want everybody around to hear. So make
Hmm.
sure you do what's needed to explain to everybody to communicate. Um, I know I'm gonna ask you this question, and it's not something that we had put on the list, but I just kind of want to touch bases on it. What is your thoughts or feelings when you see or hear of someone who have applied for a position, and they in the media, they on TV, and then you find out that that person really was not a professional signer. It was just I don't. First of all, I don't understand how somebody can even get on national TV and nobody's vetted them enough to know that they're not signing.
Right,
I
right.
don't understand that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the situation when President Obama, I think he was speaking in Africa, and the gentleman was just there, to use one of the phrases, flapping his hands. He was
Mhm.
not a sign language interpreter. And of course, that is heartbreaking to the deaf community. You know, somebody, I mean, because you're up there representing yourself as such, but you're not, you're not providing equal access to those deaf people.
Mhm.
And that's all deaf people want. They don't want anything special. They just want
Right.
equal access to communication. And if we as the hearing community will understand that and make sure that's provided, then there are no issues. But I think it's heart wrenching. Some people will do anything for a dollar, and I think it falls into that category. But how can you live with yourself and you're misrepresenting? It's not a good thing at all.
Yeah.
Definitely not a good thing at all.
That would be like someone who, have a project to do and the instructions you get has nothing to do with your project.
Right.
And
Right.
I still don't understand how the people in control or the people who vet this person who hire whatever, that to me mean that they didn't take time out to understand their craft, that they would just let somebody who they seen the credentials on the paper and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, they good. And that was, I mean, and it's not, that wasn't just a one-time situation. It happens a lot. And then you have to wonder how many times are there people in situations where the person know just enough to get a position, but now you have somebody who really need assistance and that
Mhm.
person can't assist them. Nobody
Right.
around even know because they don't know it.
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
but they have,
Unfortunately, it happens. Fortunately, it's happening less than it used to. You
mm-hmm,
know. But there's some remarkable organizations. We talked about NAOB Atlanta, the NAOBI. It's commonly referred to as NAOB Atlanta, and there are some amazingly qualified and certified interpreters with that organization. Um, there are numerous organizations that are there.
mm-hmm.
You know, so yes,
we,
that are
we
there
have
for that purpose. Yes.
we have
How long is schooling to become a professional interpreter?
I'm sorry.
The schooling. How long is the schooling?
Well, there are different programs that are for sign language interpreters, interpreter training programs. There are numerous programs, but in addition to finishing those degrees, there, for instance, the one at Georgia Perimeter at the time, and of course that's changed. It's now Georgia State. But at the time when I went through their program, it was a full 2-year program, but
mm,
still, you have additional things that you have to do. Um, they're they're different. For instance, I my focus is educational interpreting, so I have to be tested, and I have to pass. As far as those credentials, I have to make sure that I am qualified. There are also the nationally certified interpreters who do more freelance interpreting. Some do educational as well, but Registry for Interpreters for the Deaf (RID), they have a qualifying system as well, a certification system as well. So just depending on that interpreter, what their focus is, you know. But RID is there for any interpreters, whether educational or not. I chose the educational route because one of my biggest goals is literacy for deaf children, and that's due to the misconceptions.
mm-hmm.
Due to the misconceptions, I remember this was earlier in my interpreting career. There was a young man, and he would get so frustrated because we had what was called this AR program, Accelerated Reader Program. So the kids had to choose a book that was an AR book, and they had to read. The teacher requirements were they read the book twice and then take an AR test. And so this one child, I mean, he was trying so hard, and he just kept getting like a 20 and a 40. It would usually only be 5 questions. So if you miss two, that's an 80. And he would get so frustrated, and he almost want to throw the book down. He said, but I read it. And so we took time with him. I remember just pulling him aside and let him read the book to me. And I'm watching him sign what he's reading. And that's when I realized what was happening. And we're talking about the difference between English and the difference between ASL. And for example, I remember this particular sentence. And what this child signed was he got, this is like you get something on and he spelled bus. But he's thinking like physically got something. Okay. Now this kid rides the bus every day. So I pulled him. I said, well, wait a minute. I said, let's change that name. So instead of he got on the bus, let's change it to this child's name and then say got on the bus. So when you get on the bus, what do you do? And he thought for a minute. I said, okay, every afternoon when we leave school, you get on the bus. What do you do? And he said, oh, I get on the bus. Yes, you sit down in the seat, you get on the bus. But he was thinking in his mind, because it said he's thinking get something. And it's like when we started to work through some of those things, and there's this amazing program that we started to work with our kids on. It's called the Fairview Learning System. You think of a word like the word run. Okay, a person can physically run. It's signed like this. Someone can have a cold and their nose is running. It's not signed like this. It's signed like this. Oh, it rained so hard and the water was running on the street. Or I have a run in my stocking. Okay. So, the faucet, he turned the water on. Oh, the water's running. Turn it off. The water's running. So it's like, it's that one word, but it has so many different meanings. And you can't say, oh, his nose is running. Okay. Did your nose get off of your face and it's running down the street? No. So it's like I said, the language differences and understanding multiple meaning words. Okay, wait a minute. It means this, but it can also mean this. And it can also mean that. So when you teach those things, you teach all the different meanings for that word, and that child's going to sit back and think about, okay, so in this situation, what does it mean? So that's what those sorts of things that really can, a child can really focus on. And we've seen some of the literacy levels improve by implementing that program at our school. And it just opens up the opportunity for them to have multiple words to choose from or multiple meanings. It's the same word, but multiple meanings. So those things are so critical instead of, and once that child started to think through things like that, and we would sit and we would read the book and we would sign it, he started making 100, and it was like, I can see the smile on his face now. It's like the best thing, so he was capable before, but it was the language, just, just differences in the language where he wasn't processing the words that he was reading in the right way. So seeing those faces when they get it, that's part of the beauty. That's one of the things that I love most about this whole thing, working with deaf children.
What were you going to say, Ariana?
The learning program for the youth. Can you repeat that and share with some of the village for parents who may not know how to access some programs and
Okay.
resources?
Yes. It's called the Fairview Learning System. And it basically focuses on, there's a portion of it called bridging. For example, as I stated, ASL is not a word for word English order word replacement. You might have one sign that covers 3 words. And so it focuses on that to share those situations, which we teach the kids, and also focuses on the multiple meaning words. And say, for instance, someone who has a deaf child, there's an organization that I just absolutely love. It's ASDC, American Society for Deaf Children. And they have an incredible program for educators as well as families of deaf children, as well as, where English is not your first language as a family. So they have an amazing program that really focuses on families learning sign. They have workshops that they provide. So it's another amazing organization. And I think
Wow.
it's asdc.org, if I remember correctly, the website.
I never, and you was talking, I'm like, I've never thought about one word that can have so many different meanings, because we just know when we're talking language that we just know if I say my nose is running or run, we know that. But you
Right,
never think about when you're signing those words, you have to do something to distinguish the difference between what I mean when I say if I'm running or the water's running or whatever.
right,
I
exactly.
don't, we don't think about that because of the late way we communicate. We just speak.
Because we've heard it from a child growing up. That's what we've always heard, so we know exactly what it means. Yeah.
Wow.
So one thing that's really important too, the sooner a deaf child can be exposed to ASL, the better. Because you
Mhm.
think about all the things that children are learning at age 1, age 2, when they first start to talk. And they've got some amazing programs to assist with that. Babies Can't Wait, Georgia Pines. Those are some programs right here in Georgia that are available, for a child that if I say, for instance, if I knew nothing about sign language or the deaf community and I just had a deaf child, it's great to know those resources are there. They will start working with you early, 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 and make sure that that child has access to language. So
Mhm.
it's a beautiful thing. And those programs are there and available for all of us to take advantage of. We just need to make that step to take advantage of them.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that as a parent, that to not do that is almost like dismissing your child.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I I just don't understand how somebody would not want that, to bridge that gap of communication, because it is so important, especially if something happened and they come home upset, and
Hmm.
they upset, and it happened at school, but you can't get that in-depth conversation because you
Right.
don't know. And I think just like with us, or even with other people who speak different languages, the more emotional they get, the more they lean towards their form of communication.
Yes.
And I think it
Yes.
would be the same way, even though they know mom don't understand it. Now they upset, and that's just
Hmm.
come natural to say this is how I feel. So you have to, as a parent, and I hate to say it this way, but you have to be responsible enough
You have to.
to communicate
Absolutely.
with your child,
Absolutely. You have to.
or
You
to communicate for them. And you can't advocate for your child if you can't understand or explain. So when the teacher
right.
said they did this, you don't even have the ability to say, well, this is what they meant, or this is why. So
Right.
it's so
Exactly.
many pieces and layers to understanding how to communicate for and with your child.
Yes. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's
And
so.
and there are, I know I mentioned a lot of people don't take the time, and what we have to do is we have to prioritize our child.
Hmm.
A lot of people say, well, it takes a long time to learn. You got to start. You
Hmm.
got to start. You know, because what happens is, and I have seen a couple of examples. That child becomes so frustrated because mama doesn't understand me, daddy doesn't understand me, so they're going to start doing things, lashing out to get attention. We've
Hmm.
seen that, and it's just all about being able to communicate.
Yeah, it's
So
like when I think watching Ray, and I remember when he first started having issues, his mom more or less said, I can't hold your hand because I have to give you the ability to
mhm,
understand what you're dealing with and how. And I thought, how painful it was for her, but she
Mhm.
knew if I don't do this, I'm
Right.
gonna be crippled and handicapped.
We need more mamas like that.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes, because it was
Absolutely.
very, very interesting. So let me ask you this question: interpreting versus signing. What is the? Well, I guess I know the difference is one is you're interpreting, but I guess this goes to what we were saying about earlier. If you don't understand signing, you can't be an interpreter.
That's correct. You cannot be an interpreter without understanding signing. And there's so much more to interpreting. You asked the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is not just putting signs with an English structured sentence. There's several things that are also a part of the language. The expression. I've had people ask me, why y'all make all those faces? It's not that we're just up there making faces. That literally is a part of the language. I
Mm-hmm.
went, they have this big event in Orlando, Florida. And I remember they call him Dr. ASL. And he's a teacher at the time, it's been a few years ago that I was at that conference when this situation happened. But he's a teacher at, I think, North Florida School for the Deaf. And he also teaches at, there's a university there in North Florida as well that he teaches at. I don't recall the exact name right now, but he did this workshop on classifiers. The name of the workshop was Classifiers on Fire. And classifiers are something, it's a part um, of American Sign Language that shows how something moves or the intensity of something. And there was a student that he had in his class that was very upset because he did not get the grade that he was hoping to get in his ASL class. And what the instructor shared with us, he said all of his signs were formed perfectly. He said, but he had absolutely no expression. And
Mm-hmm.
that's so much a part of the language that you can't call yourself signing correctly, but none of this is there. None of the expression is there. And so that he was talking about how that student was so upset, but and he had to work with that student, and the student did much better. But it is such a part of the language. So it's not that we're just up there as interpreters making faces. It's a part of the language, and it does show intensity of something. You know, you can have a sentence that, because of your expression, your eyebrows, furrowed eyebrows, that's more of a question versus, the intensity of something. Like in ASL, you wouldn't say, I worked hard. You would say, oh, I worked today. This is just a normal work. Or I've worked hard today, in this expression and the intensity and how you do it. That's what gives the message. How did you just work, or did you really work? And that's part of it. So without those things, it's like pieces of the message are just lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a full message. You know.
Like
So
a
I'm sorry.
like a text message with no face.
Right. Exactly. Just
Mm-hmm.
just right. Without the emojis.
Right, right. So I guess your facial expressions would be the same as a human person's tone.
Absolutely. Like the intonation of the voice, expressive, like something, if someone, stop it, versus, oh, stop what you're doing, it is. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
exclamation point. Yeah.
Wow. I just never knew it was so much to sign language and stuff. I mean, I've often looked at the expressions, but I never paid attention to think that it was actually part of the signing.
Yes.
And it
Part of the
is,
language.
hmm. And it
Part of
makes
the
sense.
language.
It makes sense because I can say your expressions and the intensity of it. And I just wish that want the community, to the village to understand that the ability to speak this language or understand this language helps to create a stronger bond in a stronger village because
Absolutely.
people need that assistance. And I mean, can you imagine how you can release the frustration if you can understand, oh, this is what they're trying to say, so you can go and speak for them, versus trying to, you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to explain. So now I'm trying to explain something I don't understand to somebody who don't
Right.
understand. So the importance of being able to bridge that smooth communication. And the thing I like about it in the beginning is that you have a passion for it over the passion for money, because I don't think this is something that when you go in for the money, that's when you have the people who don't get a right expression. So
Right.
who just enough to know what they're saying, but not enough to explain what they're saying.
Exactly. Exactly. That's like I remember when I went from, because I had made the decision to resign from my corporate community and go back to school to get my certification for sign language interpreting. Because when I graduated from college, that's way back in '81. So a whole lot had changed. As I mentioned, I stayed close to the deaf community because the people that I worked with in my corporate job, there were a lot of people. There were 6 people. It ranged anywhere from 2 to 6 over the years, deaf people who worked at our facility. So I thought I was kind of really staying in tune. But like I said, the literacy for deaf kids, that's what really kind of got me ignited again to really want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back to Georgia Perimeter. I still was working full time, but I went back and would I was going to school in the evenings, like from 6 to 10. Um, and the whole thing there was to just really, really, like I said, focus on the literacy piece. But it's like when I resigned from my corporate job. Okay, I graduated Georgia Perimeter, and my corporate salary was pretty decent. I was real pleased with it. Okay, but when I first was starting in the school system, now our school system salaries are not what they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my husband, he was like, "Wait a minute, what? You gonna make how much?" He just thought, he's like, "You sure you want to do this?" Because it was a huge difference in the salary that I left and the salary that I went to in the
Mm-hmm.
school system. But it was all about, my kids, they had gone and, they were grown and gone. So, they weren't necessarily in the household anymore. So we didn't need as much, you know. But that's how much I wanted to do this, that my salary was like less than half of what I was making coming in when I first came into the school system. But it wasn't about that. It was
Mm-hmm.
about, you know, being driven by something that you really wanted to do. It was like my calling.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when it comes to things like that, we have choices to make. And
Mm-hmm.
I made the choice that I made, you know. So, thankfully I've been in the school system for a few years now. So it's not like it was when I first came in, but at the same time it's a huge difference. But it was my calling. I believe that this tugging at my heartstrings was real, and I
Mm-hmm.
kept thinking about it, kept wanting to, make a difference there. And I absolutely love what I do at the school where I work. We have 16 deaf kids, and we're getting ready. We know of 3 more that we're going to have for next semester.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and we have them from age 3 in preschool. And next year we'll have some in fourth, so at each level between preschool and fourth grade, we have kids, and we have an amazing team of interpreters, and we just love, making a difference in our kids' lives and just providing that equal access that they need to, be all they can be.
And I know also you signed at church, and I was wondering, when it comes to signing, and you have a group of people, like when the choir, and but still you have to sign to the people. How do you do? Is that any different than doing just a one person ministering versus having a whole group of people you're trying to do? How do you do that with them still being able to get a?
Well, the thing is, first of all, preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when the choir gets the songs that they're going to sing, I also get the songs. And
Okay.
it's not a matter of, say for instance, it's a song I've never heard before. I got to really listen to it, understand the meaning of the words that are being said, and you have to put that in a way that provides that message to the deaf community. So it's not just hearing the words and then signing what they're saying, because they might say a word that if you're just signing words, the meaning could be off. Kind of what we shared before.
Mm-hmm.
If I just listen to "I'm gonna run to you," you know, when we hear that, what does that mean? You know, so preparation is essential. So I
Hmm.
love that usually they provide the songs, but also with me, I'm always listening to gospel music, always listening, getting it into my spirit, understanding what that song is saying. So even if the choir hasn't sung that song yet, maybe when they do decide to sing it, I've listened to gospel music enough that, oh, I may have heard that one before. And then it's a matter of putting the finishing touches on the best way to convey that message. So it's all about preparation. It's all about listening to music. It's all about studying to be able to provide that message. I always wanted to be like, if 50 deaf people were in our church on Sunday, I need to make sure that they feel the same thing that all the hearing congregation feels. So it's
No.
my duty to share that and communicate that. Knowing stories in the Bible. So when Pastor gets up, we're not doing the sermon right now because right now we don't have deaf members who are coming on a regular basis. But still, it's all about preparation. Our late Archbishop Jimmy Lee Smith, when he first knew that I knew a little bit of sign language, he's like, "Well, Sister Vicki, I'm gonna need you to come and sign at the church." I'm like, "Well, Bishop, we don't have any deaf members." He said, "Well," he said, "but," I think he said, "and." He said, "No." He said, "But when they come, we're going to be ready."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the spirit that I've gone with. So whether or not we have 0, 5, 10 deaf members, it doesn't matter. It's about being able to convey that message. It's like when you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, every time I think about what Bishop Jimmy Lee told me personally, that's what keeps me inspired to do what we do. And we're sharing that. We have, people in the church who are learning sign language as well. And, so we're just keeping that at, keeping our focus on that. The more people that can learn, the better.
Yeah. And I think if you, because I've been to several churches where they have people that sign, and I
Mhm.
always think how impressive if you come in and there's already a spot where you can go and they say this is for you. I think
Yes,
that not only make the person feel welcome, but it make them able to really receive what they say. These people want me to hear,
yes,
so it
yes.
shows the importance of it. So I just think that you're doing such a phenomenal job, and I like that you're doing it in a way that's for other people. It's not about the money. It's not about the prestige. It's about the benefit and who can benefit from it.
Right.
Um, it
Making a difference
yeah,
in
and it
people's
makes a
lives.
difference. I think with your attitude makes a difference because there are so many people that um, I guess you can say they have positions, but they don't have the right attitude.
Right.
And
Right.
it shows. And that's why I always say if my child have a teacher, I want to be a teacher that went into teaching for the benefit of teaching, but
Yes.
didn't go into it for the finances or well, wasn't nothing else I could do or
Right.
whatever. So all
Right.
that
Right.
matters um,
Yes.
because people are important, and
Yes.
regardless. What I always say, I had a play I want to do, and it's called "Don't Diss My Ability," because just because my ability is different than yours, it's still my ability.
Right. Right.
And you can't
Absolutely.
hold that against me because I may be the one that can assist you. So I just think it is so important that we learn that. And I do think modern technology, I don't know if that's been a benefit or a crutch because people think, well, they can just text it or they can just write it,
Mhm.
But what if you
Yeah.
just do it? What if you don't have time to? text? What if your phone go dead or whatever? So technology is good, but I think it's a crutch, and I think sometimes that slows down the progress.
Right, right. It's good. There are pros and
So
cons to it for sure, but nothing,
mhm.
just nothing replaces a real live interpreter. You know,
Right.
some hospitals have used things like the VRI as far as video relay, but it's like it's not a cure all. It's
Mhm.
not a cure all. Some people say, "Well, it's better than nothing," but it's not all that it needs to be. For example, you know.
Okay. Okay. And
So yeah,
I want to mention that you go to a lot of the Word Christian Tabernacle International with Senior Pastor Oshabar Hartman and leading lady Ebony Hartman, because there may be someone out there that may say, where can I go? Because I can see if you go to a church and they don't have that, that could stifle
right.
you and make you feel like either you don't want to go and seek
Hmm.
somewhere else. It's almost like you say when somebody go to church and they're mistreated because they don't look right, they don't dress right, or whatever.
Right.
It's the same thing if
Hmm.
I go to a church and I don't have the ability to hear the way you hear,
Yes.
and there's
Right.
nothing in place. So
Right.
it's important that people know that there are resources out there, and there are people such as you who I feel like you have been anointed to do what you're doing, because
Thank you very much.
you can't step from the big echelon of finances based upon just an inward whim. It's something that you have, it's a calling, like you say, and you
Right.
recognize and acknowledge that. And I do feel like because of the sacrifice that you make, that God will bless you or have blessed you because you're doing what you're called to do. And most people are chasing the money, but you're
Yes.
chasing the purpose. And I
Yes.
really, I appreciate that. I don't know
Thank
if
you.
you know just how much we appreciate it.
Well,
And I think the appreciation from those of us who can hear should be given to you more so than those who don't, because you are benefiting us. This is their world. What you're doing, this if you're not able to hear and you're hearing impaired, you're living in their world. But for those of us, we're outsiders, and you're
hmm,
bringing us in.
yes. Let me step in and make one correction.
Hmm.
Please refer to the deaf community as deaf and hard of hearing. They take offense to the hearing impaired.
Okay,
So
okay.
I know that that used to be a common term that you would hear. There's still a lot of documentation that has that. So I know you've probably seen it somewhere, but just for you to be aware, for your
Mhm.
audience to be aware, deaf and hard of hearing. Yeah, or
Okay.
deaf slash hard of hearing.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. And which
yes,
is good, because and even again, those are things that we need to know.
yes.
you know, because just that can create an issue to where now that person is defensive, and then
Hmm.
everything goes, so it's just a little small details that people have to understand that makes a difference. So, and that's why we like to bring people with your skill set on, because there's so much more to it than just knowing, like you say, the alphabet. A lot of people think,
Right.
oh, if I learn the alphabet, well, then I'm fine. But there's so much more. This is a language. This is not
Yes.
just something you do. It's a whole language.
Absolutely. And I know I mentioned initially, oh, you learn the alphabet, that's better than nothing. But yes, there's so much more than that. But one thing I wanted to say too, deaf people are so welcoming. When they realize, like, a couple of people that I've heard this mentioned, well, I didn't say any, I saw some deaf people. I didn't say anything because, I don't know a lot yet. I said, oh, you should have gone to say hello. I said they would have loved just the fact that you took time to come say hello to them. And they're
Hmm.
so welcoming. You could just let them know I'm just learning. I'm a new learner. I just know a little bit. And that just makes such a difference. So never let your feeling, oh, I'm not good enough to say anything. I've heard one lady said, oh, I saw some people signing in the restaurant we went in, but I didn't know enough, so I didn't say anything. I was like, I wish you had. They would have loved that. And just to know that somebody is trying to learn their language means so much. So don't shy away. Learn as much as you can. Don't shy away. One of the best learning tools is LifePrint, LifePrint. lifeprint.com. Dr. Bill Vickers, he's deaf himself. And he basically, there's a university in California. I can't remember if it's Sacramento or San Diego, but he teaches ASL at that university.
Hmm.
But lifeprint.com is a site, it's his site. And basically, a lot of the lessons are the setting is his classroom. So he might be one on one with a student. He'll type in something that you'll see on the computer screen that he's asking his student, okay, how do you sign this? And they'll go through. So you can learn a lot of vocabulary. It's a great, great learning tool. Another really good resource in the Atlanta area is Georgia Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. They, provide a lot of resources as well for the deaf community. So just to share some of those resources with you all as well.
Because I know my brother-in-law, sometimes when we go visit him in Sacramento, he know a little bit Spanish, but not a whole lot. But I've noticed that the first thing he tells them is, I'm not fluent in the language, but I know a little bit. And then he
Okay.
goes on. And it could be the same way. You can learn enough to let them know, look, I know a little bit. And I think, like you say, that will also open up the conversation for you to begin to speak to them, and they can show you, oh, well, this is how you say that. So I like the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you point out you don't have to know a lot,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit. And like you say, when people see that, it's like, oh, so you want to know more? Let me show you. Let me help. So that's
Right.
that's good. That's a good conversation. So
Yes.
we definitely enjoy the conversation today and the information because I think it's just needed. I think we, as a village, in order for us to be complete, everybody have to be included, and that's whether those who can't see, can't speak, whatever the situation may be. It doesn't matter. They are part of the village, and their things that they know will strengthen us as we continue to go along. So we're very thankful today for your wisdom, your knowledge, and just taking the time out of your day to speak to us. So we're very excited
Oh,
about it.
thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with your village. That's beautiful. Thank you.
It's good. It's good. Like I say, I know I've known people growing up that have had issues, and when I see them in positions where they just go and talk on it, it's just like, wow, that's amazing to know that their life is what we would consider different, but for them it's normal.
Yes. Yes.
And I think being exposed to more people like that, I realized that their normality is just different than ours, but it's still normal.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think
Absolutely.
they want to be treated as such, not like
Absolutely.
just you just communicate differently.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, that's good. So now, if anyone do want to reach out to you or whatever, we always like to give you a chance to give your information in regards to how people can contact you and such in regards to
Mhm.
sign language.
Sure. Sure. I'll be glad to share my email address. Feel free to ask questions. If I have the information, I'll be glad to share. If I don't have it, I'd work with a tremendous community of interpreters. If I don't have it, I'll be glad to get the information. So my email address is bass, BASS, dot VICKI, the number three, at gmail.com. And once again, bass, BASS, dot VICKI, the number three, at gmail.com.
Okay, and let me see here. So I want to make sure because um, I think it's important that people are able to tap into that resource. And I think when people see the importance of it, that they're more apt to. Because just from listening to you, I'm like, well, maybe that is something that I would try to learn more about. Because, like this, when I was young, I was always intrigued with it because it just seemed, to me, I think it seemed incredible for somebody to be face to face and say nothing, but yet communicate just like everybody else. To
Right,
me, I've always been amazed and impressed with it more than looking at it like, why. And to be honest with you, in the beginning, when I was younger, I never even put it with the fact that they could not speak because I was just caught up in the fact that they was doing that. And now I see that it wasn't that they couldn't speak per se; they just spoke differently than we do.
Right. Absolutely.
you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, but again, we definitely appreciate you. You got anything, Ariana?
I want to, apologies. I just want to say thank you for reminding us the value of communication and the gift that it is, and the
Yes.
opportunity to embrace the diversity that God created us in and be inclusive so that we can all grow. I
Yes.
pray that we recognize in our homes communication can be like the Tower of Babylon, from deaf to English to Spanish, and having those that aren't able to be seen or heard can be limited. And so, with God's goodness, we have all opportunities and ways to be inclusive and make sure everyone is heard and uplifted. And
Yes.
so, thank you again, Ms. Bass, for sharing us in
Sure.
ways we can do that for the deaf
Sure.
community.
Sure. Thank you all so much.
Yes, it has definitely been a pleasure. Again, we thank you and we welcome you because you are part of our village, and you are an
Thank,
important part of our village. And the village cannot survive without those such as yourself.
thank you. Thank you. Thank
So,
God for the village.
yes, and we thank God for your gifting and for your willingness.
Thank
You know,
you.
like Pastor always say, your best ability is your availability.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I like that. So with that being said, we're getting ready to end out this session for today. I just want the village to know that Miss Vicki is not just someone who understands and knows signs. She's someone that's I feel is led by God. And that's the most important thing because of your love and passion for what you do. We all have different gifts that we have that we can offer. But if your attitude is not matched with your gift, well, then that right there is a misconception or miscommunication, and that will damage the presentation of the gift that you have. The Bible does say that your gift will make room for you. You have to first make room for your gift. So we
Amen.
thank you for allowing your gift to speak for you and to do it so elegantly. It's just
Oh, thank you.
it's yeah, you really do it. So and now whenever we see other people, we can understand what they're doing with the expressions and everything.
Mhm.
So you really have given us so much information. And
Thank
again, I
you.
want to thank you. We appreciate you. And as going forward, there'll probably be other times we invite you on again because we want this to be a ongoing conversation.
Okay. All
Yes.
right.
So we may even try to get some other people who um, that understand that, and that way maybe you all can communicate with us because they know the language, they speak the language, they utilize it. So we definitely want to continue to dive deeper into this so we can change the narrative on people who can't hear the same way that we hear.
Amen. Amen. And thank you so much. And all that you shared about me, that's nothing but God's grace. And I'm
Exactly.
thankful for it. All right.
Yes. All right, everybody. This is Pastor Lorenzo Evans with this that It Takes a Village podcast. Hope that you have enjoyed this wonderful conversation. Hope that we've reached everybody that needed to be reached for this time. Those who come and listen later, again, if you have any questions or whatever, the information is definitely there where you can reach out um, to Vicki because she is definitely a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure you'll be able to answer any questions that they have. Like you said, if you can't answer the questions, I'm sure you'll be able to get those answers.
Yes.
So don't be scared to reach out and speak to her, get information going forward. And if there's any parents out there that feel like, wow, maybe now there's a resource, Miss Vicki Bass is
Yes.
that's the way to go. Reach out. Please do not let your child suffer in silence. Do not let your child walk around in the world of darkness because you have not yourself led them to the light of hearing and speaking and communicating differently because it's all about communication.
Yes.
It's a different form, but at the end of the day, it's just communication differently than what we have been raised to think is the norm when it comes to communication. So we thank each and every one of you again. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another exciting guest. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves today, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Well, again, thank you, Miss Vicki Bass, for your information, your wealth, and your knowledge. And we will see y'all again later. Have a good day. This is Pastor Lorenzo Evans with my co-host Ariana Turner. And we'll see y'all later.
All right. Take care. Thank you.